Hey gamers, today I'm going to review the game Liguria. Let's check it out. How to set up for the game is you're going to lay out these islands. I've kind of condensed it so it'll all fit in the camera here. But you're going to put these islands out, all 9 islands out, between each player board, which is also that person's harbor. Each player is going to get little pawns, little meeples of their color. And they're also going to get their little starting captain player right here. Now, what they're going to do is they're also going to have their little boat here, and it's going to start in their harbor. Each one has one that starts in their harbor. They're also going to have 2 of these little tokens of their color. So I am the orange player in this example, so I have 2 orange colors here. And they're going to put them here and here over these emblems. Now I'll explain what these mean in a minute. But first thing they're going to do is they're going to try to do an opening draft. So in setting up this game, you're going to draw tiles out of this crazy, zany looking bag, lay them up in the front. If it's a 3-player game or 2-player game, you're going to avoid these 3 spaces. But since I'm setting up for 4 players, I put it for 4 players. Also for 4 players, 3 players or less, you wouldn't have that one card field. You pull out 4 of these cards from this deck here that's already pre-shuffled, and then you determine who would go first. First player would get on the number 4 spot. Third player would go here. Second player goes here, but if you're on the second spot, you also get 1 silver coin. The game comes with these coins from denominations of 1 to 3. And then the first player would go right here in the first spot, and they would get 2 silver coins. Now, in this order, 1, 2, 3, 4, they're going to put themselves right here up on the track to determine how many tiles they're going to get and if they're going to collect any coins as well. So, for instance, let's say I'm the orange player and I want to get 3 tokens, but I'll get a coin. So I'd go right here. So I get my coin, and that's where I stay in line. Then green player goes next. They say, you know what? I want 4 tiles and 1 coin. Purple says, I want 2 with 2 coins. So he puts himself here. And gray says, ooh, I want to go first. So I'm going to get 2 tokens and 1 coin. So this is the order of how they will be choosing the tokens, with gray going first, but they're taking, of course, the least amount of tokens. And the rule here is you can only take them if they are together. So for instance, I could take these 2 since they're side by side, or these 2 since they're both side by side. I could not take these 2 since they're not side by side. Now, if I wanted to, there is a way to do that. I would have to pay a coin for each time I skip a token. So for instance, if I wanted this one and this one, the 3 swords there, I would have to pay 1, 2 coins to get both of these. Now let's say gray player took both of these, all right? So gray player takes both of them, they go back up here, and all this shifts down. All right, and then purple player will go next. They get to pick 2 in the same order, and then 3 and 4, and then we go back. Everyone goes back down to these starting points here. Now, any tokens that were not chosen are taken out of the game. There's plenty of tokens for all the rounds here, so you don't put them back in the bag. You just throw them out, and they're out of the game. Once everyone's chosen their tokens, they're going to put any tokens on their player board. For instance, if they take these little ship tokens here, they're going to put it right down here. If they took any of the bags, right here, or any of the walls, right here, or if they took a bishop token, then they would place it right here. Now each player also does have some player shields where they're going to put paint cubes and other things as well, and I'll talk about what goes behind your player shield in a moment. But from that point on, the next thing they have to do in the same order here is choose one of these cards. As you see, the first thing on these cards, you see these top numbers. They have negative and positive numbers, and that is prestige in the game. Now at the end of 8 rounds, you want to have more positive than negative. The negative cards have better abilities on them, but they do hurt you at the end of the game. If you are -1, for every minus you're below, for every 1 point you're below 0, you're going to get 5 negative points at the end of the game. So that can really add up. If you're -2, that is 10 minus victory points you have. So you need to be careful on what card you choose, positive or negative. The more positive the card is, the probably bad it is for you in the game, but of course you do want to break even. Now the second thing you may notice is these little ship wheels here, captain wheels. And captain wheels are basically movement. If we look back down on my player board here, the more captain wheels you have on here allows you to have more movement. Now a space is someone's port or any one of these islands. As you see, some of the islands have little tokens on them for victory points, which I'll talk about in a minute. Some of them are just there to just take up space. They're islands that are just pointless and non-inhabitable. But anyway, the more you have of these, the faster you can move. So cards could add to this value. And while I'm at the player board, let me just tell you what the other tokens do. These bags allow you to pick up paint cubes, because that's what you're doing. You're taking and delivering paint cubes for the bishop. And what you're going to do is, however many of these bags you have on this row here, and it's signified by the bag there, allows you to pick up that many cubes, either on islands or on other people's port. So if I had 2, I could pick up 2 at one time. If the purple person had 3 cubes on their port, I could only pick up 2 of them. They would be the 2 of my choice, but still I could not pick up all 3 unless I had a third bag here. So the more bags you have, the more cubes you'll be able to pick up. The next one here is a wall. If you put up a wall there, it automatically gives you 1 victory point. If you have a bishop here, it gives you 1 prestige point. Remember, I told you don't want to be negative in the prestige, so getting bishops will actually help you in establishing some positive prestige points that you may need by the end of the game. Now, just to take a quick look at some of the other things they have here, they have scrolls for diplomacy. What this means is, if I was to pull around someone's port, I could play one of my scrolls right here on any one of their rows there, put my little meeple guy to show that it is mine, and for every token that they have on this row, or on whatever particular row I decide to take over, I'm going to get 2 victory points at the end of the game. So this is what gives you victory points at the end of the game. Now, the next person, let's say Gray comes by here, and Gray brings their ship by, and they want to have a diplomat there. Well, what they're going to have to pay is now 2 scrolls. Since I already paid 1, they have to pay 2. Now, as you see, here's a token here. Maybe they picked this one up. It had 2 scrolls on it. It doesn't have to have 2 scrolls on it. You can give 2 tokens with 1 scroll each on it. Just as long as you pay 2 scrolls, then you can put your guy here. And the next person that had to do it would pay 3, and then the next one 4. So you definitely want to be the first person to get diplomats on the ports, because that's going to gather victory points for you, and it's going to be cheaper if you do it earlier rather than later. All right, so the next one I'll talk about is knights. Now, knights come in all different, there's different tiles of 1 sword, 2 swords, 3 swords, 4 swords. Sometimes the 1 sword comes with an extra cube. That means whenever you conquer one of these islands, and let's look at one of the islands here. Let's say that I was to conquer this island. Well, just as before, I would have to pay a sword. If I was the first one there, I'd pay a sword, or if I had 2, I would have paid the 2 sword. But let's just say I paid the single sword there, and I conquered the island. I put my man there. Now, every time I go by, I'm going to gather that color cube, and all the islands have different color cubes, either red, yellow, or blue, that you can collect when you stop on it. But the only time you can collect on there is if you own the island. If, let's say, green came around and they wanted to take over the island, well, again, they would have to pay more swords than the one that's indicated there. So if they had this 2 token, they could do that. Heck, if they wanted to go for overkill and put a 3 token on there, they could. And so they do that, and now they own the island. Now, when I get pushed out, something happens to my guy. You will flip over the knight tokens, and they count as an extra prestige point. So again, this is another way to avoid those negative amounts that are on these cards here, because if your knight gets bumped out, you will get an extra prestige point to help you out, balance out your numbers. Now, at the end of the game, though, whoever's left owning that island will actually get to pick up the victory points that are associated with it. And these are all randomly generated. You flip them over, you shuffle them around, and you deal them out randomly on the island. So each island is always worth different points depending on, which token landed there. There's actually more tokens in the game than there are islands, so you're always going to have a nice variety of numbers. But anyway, that's what happens when you take over an island. That's what knights are used for. Now, the other one that I want to talk about is, of course, bishop contracts. Of course, this is why you're getting the paint cubes, is for the bishop. And you're going to keep any paint behind your player board. But at the end of the game, if you can, if you have 3 red cubes, you'll put them on this contract and flip it over and score that many victory points. Could be 3, it could be 6, it could be 7, depending on the difficulty of the cubes. So the more contracts you have and you can fulfill at the end of the game, the more victory points you'll score. Now, I want to take a closer look at some of these cards to show you a few other things about them. If you see, some of them have cubes on them. You're thinking, wow, Matt, why would this one be bad? That gives you a lot of cubes. It doesn't give you the cubes, it actually gives your harbor the cubes, which is not necessarily a good thing. So if a player picked 4, then they would have to put 1 of each of those colored cubes on their harbor. Green player may never grab cubes that are on your own harbor. These are for the opposition. Your opponents can come by and pick up cubes and put them in their boat and bring them back to their harbor. So it basically helps your opponent the more cubes you have in your harbor. As you see, this one's only +2 and it only carries 2. This one is a -1 because, hey, it's only just 1 cube on your harbor. And this one, it's really bad to have because it's a -5, but it gives you 3 movement and you don't have to put any cubes out on your harbor. So you're not helping out your opponent there. So like I said, the cards are basically balanced to help out your opponent if you pick one of the positive ones. The other one on here, there are little emblems on here. If you see, some of them don't have anything underneath the wheel, but sometimes they'll have this. It's like a U-turn, and that's exactly what it looks like here. If you pick this one, during my turn, I can choose either to keep going in the same way I'm doing it, which right now it's counterclockwise, or I could turn it around and start going clockwise around the board. Now, why would you want to do U-turns? Well, sometimes maybe you just passed a harbor and let's say it was purple's harbor, and when I passed through it, I could only get 2 of those paint cubes because if you remember, I only have 2 bags. And dadgummit, I wanted that yellow too, but I just had to pass it up. And so I moved on. Well, now it's my next turn, and I have this card that's going to let me do a U-turn. Well, we'll U-turn right back around and then park right back at that port and grab that last paint cube I couldn't get the last time. So you're going to be doing a lot of U-turns. Now, one thing about movement, you do not have to move the full amount of your movement. So, for instance, I have 2 here. I have 2 on my player board. That means I can go up to 4. But as you saw on that turn, I just went 2 spaces and stopped. Now, once you stop, that's the end of your turn. You cannot continue your movement unless your card has an anchor. If it has an anchor, you may make an additional stop. So for instance, I could have gone 1, 2 and picked up that yellow cube, and then 3 and maybe just stop there and conquer that island. You can actually make 2 stops if you have the anchor. The other icon that you'll see on the cards will be these up arrows. Sometimes you'll see 1, sometimes 2, and in this case 3. This is really good, but of course it's -5, so you may not want it. But that means you get to do some upgrades at your port. And what upgrades give you most of the time are victory points. You can flip over any of these tokens that you want and upgrade them to victory points. Now, once you do that, you lose that ability. So for instance, if I flipped over this one, I only have a 1+ movement, not a 2+ anymore. And I can't remove this from the game. It stays on my row. So I still have to I can fill it up with another captain's wheel if I wanted to, but I do not get to count this one as an additional movement. Same thing goes for your bags. You can even flip over your regular orange tiles, your personal tiles you started with, and upgrade those. The reason walls are so good to have is because, of course, yeah, you get 1 victory point at the end of the game, but if you can upgrade a wall, you get 5 victory points. That's really cool. And if you upgrade a bishop, right now he gives you 1 prestige point, but if you upgrade him, he gives you 2 victory points and 2 prestige points. So anytime someone is upgraded, they're going to help you out at the end of the game. Now, at the end of the game, you can actually flip this player board over, and it actually becomes a scoring track for you to keep score at the end. Speaking of the end of the game, you're going to play this until you get to 8 rounds. Now, if it's less than 4 players, you're going to play it for 9 rounds. And at the end of that, what you're going to do is you're going to total up the 8 cards in your hand, and hopefully they will meet 0. But here I have a 6. And here I have a 6. Oh, that's 0. Yay! But of course, I'd have more cards than this. But if I was a negative anywhere below 0, I would lose 5 points for each number I was below 0. After that, you would add up all of your victory points. Of course, any completed bishop orders that you have, and of course, don't forget those extra prestige points from defeated knights on islands, and the person with the most points wins. Final thoughts. What do I think about the game? Hey, you know what? I don't see much about this game, not many reviews, and of course I wanted to check it out because it said Queen Games. Now, Liguria was a cheap purchase on Amazon. I think this game cost me $12, 13 bucks. And as you see, that's a lot of stuff I got, a lot of bang for my buck there. I think the game is extremely fun. We actually played it. Looks a little bland at first, and then you start playing it. My entire gaming group got into it instantly, and we loved it. We loved doing the tile drafting, on who gets what, picking the cards. Sometimes you just want to get less tiles so you can be the first one to get that card. You grab too many negatives, now you're having to grab positives, but on the next round, nothing but negatives pop up, and you're screwed either way. There is surprisingly a lot of strategy in this game. Now, I don't hear many people talk about this game. I don't know why. I think it's just really good. And to me, it seems like, hear me out here, this is the prequel game to Fresco, another game that I have reviewed in the past. Fresco is, of course, the big painting game. You're painting this mural for the bishop on the chapel ceiling. And in this game, what are you doing? Well, you're collecting paint for the bishop. Why? So he can provide it to his painters for Fresco. In fact, if you look at the cubes, they are the same. And that's another thing I forgot to mention. At the end of the round, at the end of the game, another score mechanism is if you have extra paint cubes, one of each color, for each set of one of each color you have, that does give you an additional point in the game. But anyway, if you look, the paint cubes are the same as Fresco. The little people, the little meeples there, are the same as the apprentices in Fresco, and even the captain is the same as the painter in Fresco. It's obvious they use some of the same board game pieces for this one. And it's not even the same. I looked to see if it was the same designer, and it's not. So I'm guessing maybe he was thinking about making a game that connected to Fresco. Wink, wink. Is this maybe a sister game to Fresco? I don't know, but we really enjoy. I played this game. I introduced it to my gaming group, showed them this game first, and then the next game we brought out was Fresco. I said, okay, now that you've delivered all the paint to the bishop, here's what you do next. And everyone just had a great time with it. And they said, was this really the sequel to Liguria? I said, no, actually, this one came out after Fresco. But it seems to be the prequel to it. And it is a super fun game. And if you can get it for the price of a lunch, then yeah, you should definitely check this one out. All right, gamers, that's all the time I have for now. Until next time, game on!